dumb,
cool,
and weird
podcast. And the change from childhood to now. So it's going to cover a lot of different stuff, and we may actually end up going over on the hour, but we think this will be a really cool topic to talk about because I feel like a lot of people could probably really relate to this. You know? And this is going to cover a bunch of different topics in that. So, Nick, you grew up in the 90s just like me.
Yeah.
How do you think things have changed?
Well, I mean, shoot. Things got really weird, man.
Yeah.
Like, they really did. People started getting people were okay with saying things back in the day. Like, kind of like your grandpa does.
Yeah.
When he says something terrible and you're just trying to censor him. But now it's like, we had a much more mild version of that for obviously because we grew up in the 90s where we were coming out of that age. But it's like people weren't like bad at like saying like homophobic slurs as just like jokes at each other. Like now everything's just kind of offensive. Like, shoot, I just heard of this thing called bisexual privilege.
Wait, that's a thing?
That's a thing.
What?
Apparently that if you're a bisexual person, you're dating the opposite sex. It's considered you have a bisexual privilege because you have the appearance of being straight.
Oh, that's weird. Technically, I'm bisexual.
Yeah, same.
I'm more on the asexual spectrum, I guess, but like, yeah, I'm definitely bisexual though.
Just like people. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the reason why I'm more asexual now is because of kind of what we're talking about. Things have changed in the past like couple of decades, and dating for me is very different. I remember being a teenager in the early 2000s, and dating was a different game back then. You didn't have all these apps and shit that you have now, you know?
Yeah, you actually had to go out and work for like a date.
Yeah. You literally had to go work for a date, and you had some primitive stuff like on the computer, but you had to be on the computer. You weren't like out in the field like with your buddies on a phone.
We're not on a field operation out here with the phones and the dating.
Yeah, like now it's like we have basically like we have all these different apps. But back then it was like you would go on Facebook and MySpace, and you may be able to get a date that way. But they had dating websites, but they were so cringy, convoluted, and people didn't always have photos and stuff all the time. It was really bizarre.
Kind of a good way to get Craigslist killed.
Yeah, exactly. So basically what we would do is we would go to different places, and that's how we would get, our dates. We would go to like a bowling alley, or we'd go to a club or something like that.
Or a party.
Yeah, and you'd have your phone, you'd be like, hey, let me get your number. You get their number, and then you go date them,
Or it turns out it's the sheriff's department. Now you have a weird conversation with Deputy Jackass.
Yeah, and that's never fun.
No.
But that's kind of how dating was when I was a teenager, though. It was really just you had to actually meet people in person physically most of the time. And when you did meet them online, it was no vetting process. You would immediately go meet them right away.
Yeah.
Now it's like you have to text somebody for like millions of years just to get them to come meet you. And even then, they're really weird about meeting you. And it's just like, I don't know, it's just very different,
I think there's sort of like a little bit of the magic is lost when you don't like when you finish all the small talk, and then you have to get like deep dive right in there when you're actually meeting that person. Like you're going from almost spilling your heart out online through Facebook Messenger these days. So when you meet the person, you're like, shit, what do I talk about?
Yeah, exactly. And most people don't even want to like necessarily be in a relationship these days. It's just, polyamory is so popular now. I mean, people love that. And they want to just have like, I call fair weather relationships, where it's like, sometimes they want to hang out with you, but then sometimes they won't talk to you for weeks on end. It's really bizarre, like how things are nowadays. It's just almost like there's not like a deep connection anymore. I mean, I could be wrong about that. There could be people out there that still want to do stuff like that, but you really have to search for it. It's just, I feel like these dating apps have made it so easy for people, men and women, to be like, well, I don't like the way this person looks or smells or does this or does that. Well, I'm just going to leave. They never want to just deal with people's problems anymore. They just want to like get rid of them.
Right out the door.
Yeah. Right out the door. which is crazy, you know?
I always find it interesting though, because when it comes to something as much as like when it comes to dating specifically, you know, people will even post like their political leanings, like pretty much just give you a whole bio of who they are. And it's like, they shouldn't be exactly important things when you're just starting to get to know somebody, because you're already judging somebody by the cover. You didn't even read the book.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm totally there with you, man. I think what it really comes down to is people just don't want to deal with people's like bad qualities anymore, because everybody has good qualities, everybody has bad qualities, right? They want to hyper focus on only the good qualities, but then when one little thing pops up, sometimes people get upset about stuff like that, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at, you know, we're talking about, you know, like what it was like for us growing up.
Yeah.
Remember when we were kids? Your grandparents were married for like
Forever.
30, 40, 50 fucking years, man. Like that's a long time. You know,
Sometimes, and you hear stories about like when it was like really rough, like grandma and grandpa used to throw rocks at each other because they had frustrations and the neighbors knew.
Yeah.
Not my story specifically, just, you know.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, even for me, like, I grew up with my grandparents being both sets of grandparents staying married to each other. Like, sometimes they'd fight each other, but they still loved each other. And then my parents' generation, who are baby boomers, a lot of them are just divorced a lot of times.
It's like they gave up once the kids left.
Yeah. And then our generation, I know you're married and your marriage is successful, but like these days, like most people don't.
It's an anomaly.
People don't stay married very long. Like,
No.
all my friends that I know from high school that have been married, I think maybe only a handful of them are still married and they got divorced, you know?
And even that, it's like not, like there's a lot of people who are just kind of hanging on because earlier in their marriage they had kids and then they decided to abandon ship, which is wrong because, obviously if it's not working out, you should be civil and separate. But if you're not being civil and separating and leaving your kid, and you're not even sharing custody because you're both in this like really bad headspace, I mean, having an affair is obviously wrong, right?
Yeah.
But we're not talking about that. We're just talking about two people separating because they found out they just didn't like each other as much as they did.
Well, here's the thing. Like, my longest relationship was 5 years. I mean, we weren't married. We talked about having a kid, and we got pregnant a few times, but she got it aborted because we just didn't feel like we were ready.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, that was a 5-year relationship, and I consider that a really long relationship. But in the grand scheme of it all, that's really not a very long relationship compared to, you know, back in the day. Some people stayed together for like 10, 15, 20 years, and that was considered a long relationship. But like, even just that, I had like that 5-year relationship,
Yeah.
and it didn't, you know, it was a very good relationship. But the thing is, like, other than that, my longest relationships only last like a year or so, you know, and it's not necessarily something I've done wrong or they've done wrong. Sometimes it just ends, you know. It's either somebody loses interest, somebody moves, or somebody does this or somebody does that. It just seems like nowadays, like, things are just different, you know.
I mean, if you look at like something like the like military or first responders, you know, they have a higher divorce rate than the average human being because of their job stresses.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like your life gets put on fast forward when you're actually like in one of those areas, because you feel like you're older. You start wanting to become more of like a homebody. You don't go out and do things, and then one of you leaves because you're not interested anymore. Or that person has bad tendencies to try and mask what's going on within their life.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens, but it's like whenever you see it happen with like normal couples, it either happens immediately or it happens over years. Like you're talking about like, hey, mom and dad split up because after we left the house, they realized shit, they didn't need to actually stay together anymore. They realized all the kids are on their own and doing pretty okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, my parents got divorced when I was about 3 years old. So I don't know I've never known what it's like to have a normal family.
Yeah.
And maybe that's kind of affected my dating life, because growing up, I saw my dad, I saw him date a lot of women. Like, I probably saw my dad date like over 100 women throughout my lifetime. You know, some of them were more long term, but what I mean by dating 100 women is I've seen them hook up with like over 100 women. And, you know, maybe that's affected me because my body count is over that as well. So maybe maybe my dad had an influence on me when it comes to that.
They usually say that's how it works, though. It's like it's something that you've noticed in your. You good down there?
Yeah. Sorry, I accidentally knocked your water bottle over.
Oh shit!
It's okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say definitely when you witness what goes on with your parents and their relationship, it sometimes reflects into your personal life. And a lot of people, they also try to do the reverse of that. They try to make sure that they never end up like their parents in some way.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's no real shame in it either way. It's just your environment.
Yeah, I mean, growing up, my mom wasn't really around when I was a kid, and my dad was always there. So I've always had a positive male role model in my dad. But I also had my grandmother, too, who was a very good role model for me, too.
Yeah.
You know, my grandparents are really cool because they're a success story. They both were really poor growing up.
Yeah.
And my grandfather grew up in Dahlonega, which is a really poor part of, you know, it was a really poor part of town back in the 30s. And he didn't know when he was getting a meal half the time. But he left when he was 15 to join the military. And he went into the war when he was like 16, 17 years old, you know, which is that's a kid, you know. Talk about the difference between now and then.
It's crazy because like a lot of people who died on the invasion of Normandy weren't actually really like the age to enlist.
Yeah, but that was a different time, you know. And that's what I'm saying. Even for us, you know, growing up in the 90s, like I don't know if you remember this, but like back in the 90s, we had a lot of really crazy ass fucking commercials, like in your face. The 90s, I called 90s like the puke age because like a lot of the commercials and a lot of the humor was just like diarrhea.
It was lazy.
Doo-doo fucking like puke humor.
It's like
you had Beavis and Butthead, you had Ren and Stimpy, you had, I mean, Nickelodeon had slime that they would just dump on your fucking head, like Jesus Christ, dude, like shit was fucking wild, you know.
You know, but at least it was on cartoons. Now we have reality TV that's like almost as bad as that. Like it's the diarrhea.
But you know what? But you know what? That started in the 90s with The Real World.
Oh yeah, or when we followed Ozzy and his family around.
Yeah. That became popular. I mean, I'll admit, I love Jackass, I love Wild Boys, and I love Viva La Bam. And the reason why I love those shows so much is because it reminded me of me and my buddies. You know,
Yeah.
Those shows were really popular back when I was in like middle school and high school. So
Yeah.
it kind of shaped how I viewed everything. And my dad was a really cool guy growing up. My dad let me watch whatever the hell I wanted most of the time.
Yeah.
And he kind of introduced me to a lot of really cool stuff, you know? He just never was like the type of guy to keep me away from stuff.
Yeah.
And whenever I'd ask him questions about stuff, he'd always answer it. Like, I asked my dad about cuss words. And I swear to God, I can't make this up. When I was a 5-year-old kid, my dad goes, "Son, this means motherfuck you." I was just like, okay. And the funny thing is, I learned how to use that because what happened was, the reason why my dad was explaining it to me, this is a really funny story. Back when I was in 2nd grade, this girl, she threw a football and hit me in the face with it. And I looked at her and I instinctively went, boom, like this, you know? And she was just like, Miss Reeves, Wesley just shot me a bird. And I was like, what the fuck does the bird mean? And I'm saying fuck, and it means fuck you.
Yeah.
Like I'm saying in my head. I already knew what cuss words were when I was 5 or 6 years old. You know? But I mean, if I was in 2nd grade, I was probably like 7.
Something like that.
Yeah, 7 or 8. Yeah. But they disciplined me. They told my dad, and my dad pretty much explained everything to me. He's like, "Oh, this is what this means. This is what this means." And I was just like, "Okay." And he just explained it to me. And he explained it to my sister too. My sister was like 5 years old at the time.
Yeah.
So me and my sister, we've always cussed like sailors, and it was because we grew up with my dad, and my grandparents, my dad's parents, they cuss so much, dude. Like, I swear, I can't even make this up. Like people, I tell people about stuff like this, and they just, it blows their minds, you know? That's why, I have to turn a filter on around some people, because some people don't want people cussing around their kids, and I have to just like chill on that, because it's not that I don't respect their kids or respect them. It's just like, it was never a big deal to me growing up, you know?
Yeah, it's your environment.
It was just like, oh shit.
You good there?
I'm good. It was just the vernacular, you know. My vernacular was different than than everybody else's. And I had the vernacular of a 39-year-old secretary who's pissed off. So, but it's pretty funny though. I kind of take it in stride. You know, some people are like, "Oh, it's child abuse." I'm like, "Oh, well, you know, I'm an adult now, so who gives a shit?" You know?
Yeah, and it's like, shoot. I mean, we so much has like literally changed. Like, it's kind of weird now how like just words can get you in trouble.
Yeah.
These days, like, I mean, obviously, being racist and homophobic is bad.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely, dude.
Yeah, that's bad, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, it's interesting when like you see guys walking around in the streets, like waving like swastikas and everything, and not expecting somebody to beat the shit out of them. Like, oh no, it's my freedom of speech, and just like gets clocked right in the face. It's like, dude, this isn't the internet. You can get shot out here for stupid shit.
Well, it's kind of like when me and you went to that bar.
Yeah.
Like three weeks to a month ago. You know, I mean, it's the same type of thing. You know, that girl who was from Oregon, she called. You know, she said, "Oh, another movie from a white guy." And she said it in a very condescending way, and she looked to that other girl for help, and that girl was like, "No, I'm not helping you." And then that group of like guys behind us, like those black guys, they were like, "Okay, time to go." You know, they get up and left.
They got up right after that
and left. And the guy who hosted the event got up and left. And I think she got embarrassed because she realized that nobody was going to come and like to her aid. But like, you know, it's not the internet, man. Like, you know, people don't like that stuff. And not only that, this is Atlanta. This is not Portland, Oregon. You know.
So it's very interesting. I had a conversation with my buddy after we went to a punk rock concert, right?
Yeah.
And we were talking about how, you know, the South, for example, everyone always has this bad idea of the South because they're always like, oh, you know, it's the birthplace of the Klan, especially here in Georgia because it was rebirthed twice here. Mm-hmm. But people have these bad ideas of what the South is, like culturally, not really realizing like just how open we are out here and how much we're trying to get rid of that stain on our history out here. And I mean, the worst part about some place like Oregon and just generally the West Coast is because they have such hard left movements. You have a lot of people who are, you know, just probably mildly conservative, feeling like there's so much pushback. They're probably joining in these movements just to feel like they're part of a group as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you think that's a pretty common thing?
I think it is quite a common thing. I wouldn't want to say that it's obviously just one of those things that it's strange because, you know, there's a much more tolerant culture out there from the beginning, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, then again, things you can say like things are tolerant, right? Through history, but it was only slightly better.
Yeah.
Than like how bad the South's like racism was even back in like the 1950s. I mean, it was just bad all around the country. But in the South, you had lynch mobs still operating. You had people who were openly like Klans members operating. And I think that's what kind of drove us to be better out here and be more open. And it kind of gives people who are in other parts of the country a bad look at us because they think, oh, it's just a bunch of white guys. And I mean, that's all they that's all they have. They're like, they start throwing around the words like white privilege and everything. Mm-hmm. Just because they're from like some small town in Oregon and haven't been exposed to a lot of urban life or probably even a lot of diversity even in their own area.
Yeah, because what a lot of people don't realize about Georgia is Georgia's a very diverse part of the country. You know, I mean, Atlanta has has a very diverse population of people, black, white, Hispanic, Asian. And then if you go up to Duluth, for instance, there's a huge population of Asian people there,
Yeah.
and then if you go up to where you live, there's a huge population of Hispanic people,
Yeah.
So it's a very diverse place, the South is,
Yeah.
We have a lot of really bad blood here.
I think it's just because there's still a large group of people that hold on to those old quote unquote Southern values.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like we were talking about how they didn't want to bring the MARTA transit system out to Dawsonville because they were saying those people are going to come up here. Like, and you just want to go like, what do you mean by those people?
Yeah, because that's a fucking really it's like way too much on the nose. It's
Yeah.
like I got in that argument with them because I was just like, it'd probably help a lot of people, honestly. And if you don't, and if somebody's giving you a problem, then you address it when it happens. Don't like sweep it under the rug.
Yeah.
I mean, I live. It's no like secret. I live in Atlanta.
Yeah.
This is where we record the podcast. We record the podcast down here in Atlanta, and I deal with a lot of bullshit down here too. But most of the time, people just leave me the fuck alone and don't bother me.
Yeah, and it kind of makes you wonder currently with our culture where everyone's in each other's face, or at least what the media wants us to believe that we're in each other's face. It just doesn't seem like that daily. Like we actually see being out here in Atlanta, feels like it's pretty nice out here. Everyone's working together. Everybody's just trying to get better.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with you. I mean, it's like I think, especially this country
Yeah.
is a really big melting pot of people. This
Yeah.
is one of the greatest experiments ever because you could think about other countries on the planet.
Yeah.
We are the most diverse country on the planet, and we are the most like it's almost like a bunch of aliens are doing like a TV show, right?
Yeah, like in South Park
Yeah.
where they did that episode.
Yeah. It's almost like somebody stuck a bunch of different types of people from all over the planet in one place, and they're like, let's see what happens when we put all these different races together in the same place. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It's like, let's see what they do. And we still haven't died yet, so obviously something's going sort of right,
Yeah.
I mean, what is your thoughts?
I think I think things are getting better in some places. I think things are kind of deteriorating in others. Mm-hmm. But I honestly think it's just your local government more than anything that we've been so divided that we let things happen. Because, like I said, the division is just very big on political spectrums too now. You didn't really care much. I remember when I was growing up, where you actually gave a shit about somebody's politics. Like you were still friends with them. Now it seems like a lot of people have friends only in certain political realms.
Yeah,
They live in an echo chamber.
yeah, it's a really bad echo chamber. It's like
Yes.
is that a Canadian thing?
I don't know. I'm kind of
Do you say sorry or sorry?
sorry.
So you say sorry?
Sorry.
Okay, so you don't say sorry.
No.
Okay, cool. I was making sure.
You'll notice there's like a few things that'll come up here and there.
Yeah, because I know that's like a big thing is like people from Canada say that. And I know people from Canada also say Z instead of Z.
Yeah, I used to say that before becoming Americanized.
Yeah, why is it that they say Z instead of Z?
Well, I mean, you think about it, it's probably something to do with the fact that they held out longer as a British colony. I mean,
Is that a British thing?
yeah.
Saying Z?
Yeah, it's like even when you hear them say laboratory, they say laboratory. So they hold on to a lot. They sound like Americans, but talk like British people.
Well, shit. I mean, I say laboratory when I'm talking about Dexter's laboratory.
All I know is that laboratory sounds better. It sounds way like more sophisticated.
Sophisticated. I'm in the laboratory.
I'm in the laboratory. Terry, you're in your trailer cooking meth right now. You mean my laboratory? My meth laboratory?
Yeah, and actually laboratory or lavatory can mean using the bathroom too.
Yeah.
Which is pretty funny. No, it's just I think certain like sayings and stuff are pretty funny, like for Canadians, but also for like being a Southerner. I'm a Southern guy. Like I was born and raised here, so there's certain things we say too that are really weird. We say y'all.
I used to say use guys.
Yeah, and that's actually a New York thing.
It's a very northeastern thing, I noticed.
But down here, like, some people call a shopping cart, we call them buggies down here.
Yeah.
And then up north, they call them wagons sometimes. And then
Really?
some places, they call them just a cart,
Yeah, I always heard it called cart.
Yeah, it's cart, buggy, and wagon. Those are like the three things. But down here, it's buggy. We call it a buggy.
Pop or soda?
I get a buggy. It's Coke. We call it Coke down here. Can I get a Coke? It's like, what kind of Coke do you want? It's like, what do you mean, what kind of? Like people are like, you mean a Coca-Cola? It's like, no, I want a Coke. But I want like a Sprite.
I want a Sprite. But that's not a Coke. Hey, you shut up, you.
Shut up, you. You don't know what you're talking about.
You're different. Get out of here.
Yeah. But there's just so many different terminology like that. Like, we say ain't a lot down here.
Yeah.
People say that's not a word, but we say it so much, it pretty much is a word at this point. Words are, we create words and we give words meaning,
I mean, like, what is it? Canadians say a lot.
Yeah.
And apparently there's like 23 different meanings last I checked for like how to use a in a sentence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, see, I grew up in Dawsonville, man. And Dawsonville is a really southern, county. And it actually was really racist when we first moved there. It was the Klan headquarters for a long time. But it's not like that anymore. Dawsonville has changed dramatically. It's very diverse. Like when I started high school, we were pretty diverse at that point. Like so many different types of families were there. But like when we first moved there back in the early 90s, it was a very racist place. Not really much going on, and it's still kind of dragged their feet. I was telling you about didn't I tell you about the Moonshine Festival thing?
Oh yeah, the Moonshine Festival. It's the Moonshine Festival, but you can't have moonshine.
You can't have any alcohol at all. It's like they're like, we gotta keep our Christian values because this is the Christian values of this, and it's like what do you mean Christian values? It's called the Moonshine Festival. Don't you think people should be drinking at a Moonshine Festival? Well, we can't have that because it's a Christian value.
A lot of people say, things like, "Oh, we got to save the children," or Christian values, to try and defend their argument that has nothing, that has no actual backing to anything.
Well, it's funny because I've been to the Moonshine Festival a bunch of times, and and people still get drunk. People will get wasted and then come to the Moonshine Festival, or they'll walk to the bars because there's bars there now.
Yeah.
So it's like, who the fuck are you trying to fucking fool, dude? You guys are fucking stupid or something. It's not people our age. It's fucking people that are like 70 years old,
like baby boomers and stuff.
Yeah, even older, like people who are it's baby boomers and it's silent generation people that are still alive.
Yeah.
But they're just like, well, we can't have that. We can't have this because this is going to cause this and all the. Yeah. It's funny because the forum I was reading on Facebook about that, it was really funny. By the way, if you guys ever get a chance, go join the I think it's called A Look at Dawsonville or something like that. But in that group, you'll see some of the most ridiculous Southern bullshit you'll ever see in your life, like Southern conservative, crap.
The South is a meme all on its own.
Oh yeah, it's called Focus. It's called Focus on Dawsonville. It's really funny. Y'all should, if you ever get a chance, you should totally join that group and just read some of the stuff that people say in there. It's so stupid. It's like stuff that you would expect to see back in the 60s and 50s.
Your 1920s marijuana smear campaign.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't smoke this marijuana or inject it. It'll make you murder.
But it's funny because I went to high school with a bunch of friends of mine, and a lot of my friends were commenting in there, and they were trolling those people, and it was so funny. Like my friend Donald he was a senior when I was a freshman. He was like, well, shit, I'll set up the booth and I'll give out the wristbands myself, and we'll work with the cops to get this to be a good event. And then my friend Ricky was like, oh, well, and I'll bring a keg and, we'll pump that keg and it'll be great. And it's just it's funny because when we were trolling them, they completely ignored all the shit we were saying. Like I said something, my friend Ricky said something, Donald said something, and some other people I know that are my age said something. And they just completely ignored us. It was so funny,
what I'm saying? Yeah, I know what you're saying, because it's like when you meet somebody who's like that's that backwards and stupid, that they don't realize that you're making fun of them.
Well, it's funny because, like, you know, if you guys have never been to Georgia, I suggest you come here. And there's a list of places I suggest that you go visit. One of those places is a place called Helen,
Oh yeah,
which is basically just like little
it's made up Germany.
little Deutschland, basically.
It's like it's like if you took every German stereotype, put it in one town. I bet you right now the Germans have a town.
It's mostly German with a little hint of Dutch.
Yeah. But the thing about it is, like, it makes you wonder if the Germans have like their own little America town where they make fun of Americans, and they have like triple XL T-shirts as like the smallest size there, and like they sell everything in obscene proportions.
Yeah.
Like, Carl, here, come to America Town, eat your cheeseburgers. What, you want a heart attack? The only minimum we have here is three burgers within a bun.
By the way, if y'all ever go to Helen, the only good place to eat is the Hobgoblin. That's the only good place. Everything else is like just all right. I mean,
It's recycled trash.
yeah. I mean, you know, there's that place. What's the name of that? What's the name of that place? It's called On the River. You know what I'm talking about? It's like a bar.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's up the way, and it like they have really cheap beer there. But the Hobgoblin's good if you really want like good food. The thing that really tickles me about that place is during the day, it's okay to be a fucking alcoholic town where everybody's getting fucked up. But then as soon as like 9 or 10 p.m. rolls around, they close that shit down. It's like,
yeah, they want you to irresponsibly day drink. Where's the Christian values there?
yeah, they want you to irresponsibly day drink, but then as soon as 9 or 10 o'clock rolls down, well, it's time to shut that shit down.
You better be a good Christian boy.
Yeah. Makes no sense, but that's what it's like here in Georgia. It's like certain places you go to, like it's okay to be a fucking a heathen during the day, but then like as soon as like 9 o'clock rolls around, well,
Just remember,
we're just gonna go ahead and just close this shit down.
just remember that the only reason you're allowed to drink on Sundays after 12:30 is because you got your taste of Jesus for the week, so you can sin the rest of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, got people buying like carts worth of booze.
It's stupid. Yeah, I grew up Catholic, you know.
Yeah.
And so growing up Catholic, like, you know, my dad's side of the family is either Catholic or Methodist. And Methodist is Protestant, but it's like pretty much like a straight offshoot of like, of Catholic, you know, because they they have like a lot of the same Catholic like tendencies, basically.
Protestants are very, very rigid on everything.
Well, see, my mother was a Southern Baptist growing up, and they were really bizarre people because, like I said, I grew up with my dad. So being that I, you know, growing up with my dad and then seeing how my grandparents were on my mom's side of the family, I just didn't really understand like some of the stuff they thought and the way they saw the world. It was very different than my Catholic, you know, / Methodist like upbringing. It was just very different, you know.
Yeah, it's very interesting because, you know, I mean, it's like you have people who are who they're not exactly manipulated, I guess you could say, in that sort of sense with their religion. Like, had a few really good friends who were Southern Baptists or just very religious people, and they they want to live the Bible more than they want to just like preach it at people.
Yeah.
Like, it's not they know it's not everyone else's cup of tea, so they don't jam it down anybody's throat. But they're very interesting people because, like I said, they live it for themselves. They're not out there trying to convert you. Like, I've always found it very interesting that here in the South, especially, like they hand out Bibles like candy and they try to convert you, but they don't want you to put your values on them, but they'll try to put their values onto you.
Well, you know, it's like I told you, I grew up, you know, Catholic, but I was pretty much an atheist my whole life. Like, even as a kid, I just never really believed in anything supernatural, like anything at all. You know, it just never really like clicked for me. I just never really said anything when I was a kid because I was afraid of the repercussions of what my family would say to me or do to me, you know?
Since we're, and we can like circle back around in a sense too, and it's like, have you ever noticed that as time has gone on too, that a lot of people aren't exactly opting into any sort of religion anymore?
Yeah,
Like,
it's almost like people just don't really care about it as much anymore. I mean, people, you know, I've heard people complain that a lot. I've heard older people complain that young people don't really go to church anymore, and it's pretty much a pretty common thing, you know, because growing up, you know, going back to what we were talking about, like, or, you know, the whole podcast is about growing up from then to now, you
Yeah.
know, growing up, you know, we went to church every single Sunday.
yeah,
You know, and sometimes my dad would even try to get us to do stuff during the week with like church stuff, and I just was never really interested. It got to the point where I was a teenager and my dad just never made me go to church anymore. You know, when I turned about 13 or 14 years old, we stopped going to church because I think my dad got burned down on it too, because my dad doesn't go to church. He only went to church because he thought it was the right thing to do with me and Brittany, but then when he found out that me and my sister didn't want to go, he was
Yeah.
just like, oh, okay, well, we're not going to church anymore, you know?
yeah, and it's very interesting because even now people are opting into old pagan religions.
Yeah, it seems like older religions are kind of making a bit of a comeback in some ways. The thing is, like, there's a bit of a divide even among atheists, because I'm like an atheist, but then there's like this thing called New Atheism or New Atheism Plus or something like that, and it's kind of like it's kind of a thing where like they've kind of taken the atheism thing and they've kind of run with it, but then they believe in certain things that are not necessarily like based in reality.
That's just being agnostic, but with extra steps.
Well, not necessarily. This new atheism thing is basically just like they like certain social things a certain way, so they accept those social things, and without basically with a whole lot of evidence. You know, it's kind of a biological thing. You know, but like the reason why I say that is because like I'm a very skeptical guy. I'm skeptical about a lot of things, and I've just always been and see, the thing is, growing up, even when I was like a teenager, like I was considered a very woke person. That word woke.
Yeah.
I didn't know that's what it was called though back then. People
They didn't
just
have
said,
a word for that back
they just
then.
said I was like a really liberal guy. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's like knowing you personally. It's very weird because it's like we don't really have a political stance on very many things. It just depends on the issue.
Yeah, it really does. But that's what I'm saying. Like, that's what I'm just saying. Like, but growing up, that's what people thought about me. But now,
Yeah.
I'd say it's very different compared to how things are now. Because, yeah, the world is like going back to what we were talking about, like growing up. The world is a very different place. Like I said, back in the '90s, it seemed like some things were a lot more
Relaxed.
relaxed and acceptable. Like people could take a joke, but now people can't take jokes anymore. It's like people keep getting, what is that, canceled? Is what they call it?
Canceled.
Yeah.
I mean, there's people who are kind of getting canceled right now for like the right reasons. Like, you know, I just found out that apparently there was a lot of sexual assault allegations against James Franco that kind of went unnoticed and were buried by guys like Seth Rogen. And,
I heard about that.
But now Seth Rogen is like stepping back away from like supporting James Franco because he's like in too deep.
Well, then remember the Harvey Weinstein thing? You
Yeah.
know?
And that like brought a lot of questions to why is this okay in Hollywood? You know what I mean? Because not only can you blame Harvey Weinstein, but it's like can't remember who it was. The guys from The Sopranos were on like Joe Rogan way back, and they were talking about how they like shouldn't like everybody else also be held accountable, like the secretary who knows that something's going on too.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. I mean, if people know something is going on, they should. They're definitely
Because you're technically an accessory to a crime.
Yeah.
Because like it's like, oh, I wasn't the one doing it. It's like, yeah, but you know, if you're in a car when someone murders another person, you're technically an accessory to a crime. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's like you can also be charged for something if you were just there.
Yeah. Well, I think that this is something that I've learned from talking to people. Some people think that this whole thing got started, many years ago, back in the '80s. Is kind of when this whole thing got started. It was kind of a slow push, and people just kept getting more and more offended. I mean, back then it was more like conservatives were getting more offended by everything.
I mean, in the 60s, it kind of makes sense because, it's like you had a lot more stars coming up with progressive ideas like promoting the civil rights movement, and that scared scared so many people.
Well,
because
it's really interesting. It's like it used to be the conservatives were the ones getting offended by everything, but now it seems like the liberals are the ones getting offended by everything. It's like, it's really bizarre because like I have conservative friends that are actually more liberal.
I think
the more liberal than my more liberal friends. It's almost like they're more conservative. And when people hear that, they're like, what does that even mean? That doesn't make any sense. It's like, well, you got to understand conservative and liberal they have meanings. Conservative means you're more reserved about something.
Yeah.
And liberal means you're more open about something. My more conservative friends, traditional conservative friends, are more open about certain types of things and certain types of thoughts that my more liberal friends will be like, well, we can't talk about that. That's unacceptable. But then when I hear them say that, it makes me think of like conservative people from like the 80s and 90s that were like, video games are unacceptable. Violence is unacceptable. That music is unacceptable.
Yeah. I mean, shoot, it's really changed a lot. It's really changed a lot of things, but I think it's weird too because I don't even think it's really like the liberals or conservatives anymore. It's like now people are splitting off into what they call them as leftists and alt-right individuals.
Yeah,
because like
I've even heard alt-left is it becoming a term?
I think alt-left is just what they mean by when they say leftist because because I feel like there's people like who are liberals like now that they're not liked by the more extreme people that you see in the media or promoting crazy stuff on social media. Like the loudest group of people are actually technically a minority. Like you always see those people that that you have that like severely right wing guy going like, well, the liberals are really coming after me. And it's like you guys both live in the same world where there's not very much of you, but because they like the media loves to put you guys on TV, it looks like there's more of you.
Well, Fox News,
CNN,
MSNBC, NBC. It's like it's all like propaganda, but it just depends. The propaganda is either on the left or the right when it comes to those types. I feel
like Fox News has a very good platform for organizing how they do it. Like, because they do it, you have to admit, like, CNN has lost its own platform on how to organize its crap, but Fox News has found a way to put it, like, to organize it into perfect sections so it could just feed you crap on top of a lot more crap.
Well, the thing is, people don't realize this, but like it was many years ago, Fox News said, hey, we can say whatever the hell we want, and this is the way we interpret the news.
Yeah.
And people forget about that. And a lot of people don't realize that, and they still watch Fox News. I've even told my stepdad about that. I was like, hey, Fox News said this, and he was just like, well, it doesn't matter. It's like, damn, they just admitted that they kind of lie to you guys and interpret the news however they want, and you still believe it. It's like,
It kind of makes it what it they are just a more well-refined version of like the cringe media outlets that you see out there for the right and the left. Like they're just the greatest thing is I guess because they admitted to it that people have kind of accepted it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not a bunch of t-shirt, tinfoil hat wearing reporters. It's a bunch of people in like nice pantsuits, business ties, and just going to like looking like they're going to go to work and you're never going to really care.
Yeah.
Like you're just a robot who goes in and collects a paycheck.
That sounds about right.
Nice while doing it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember, being a kid, and going from childhood into teenhood. It seemed like everybody kind of talked a little bit more. And it seems like the divide keeps separating more and more, and now we're kind of like to this point where things are like this, and it used to be sort of more like this,
Yeah, one thing I was thinking about the other day was, people don't like so one thing I've noticed is like that people still seem to get like along with is people supporting the troops. For example, like that's like one of those things that it's not like out of the '60s. where people like shit on the whole Vietnam generation.
Yeah.
It's like now you got people from the right and the left who are actually going to be supporting the troops. Now, how they believe in, if they like if they agree on going to war and stuff, is where they disagree.
Yeah.
But at least it's gotten to the point where they're like, no, we can't blame the troops. We're going to blame the politicians who send them there. Like before, you had people like watching Vietnam on the news, and you were just like watching like people be like, oh God, they're baby killers, or you had someone on the other side going like, man, look at those heroes killing commies. And it was like people were divided based on the troops. They weren't divided based on the fact that these politicians were sending young men to die.
Well, it's very interesting because there's always a side to everything.
Yeah.
My ex-girlfriend grew up in Soviet Russia, right?
Oh, yes.
And she told me that the propaganda over there was the same propaganda that we got, except it was just told differently. Like, this is a perspective I never had before, And she told me that like over there they'd be like, oh, well, those capitalist pigs are this, and this, and they don't care about people. They hate people. Just like over here, they're like, well, those are commie assholes who kill their own people and don't care about this, and this. It was, so the programming was there. But at the end of the day, she still knew, and her mom still knew this was a better country to live in.
Yeah.
So they'd moved here. And I remember, so this is an interesting story from her. I remember when my ex-girlfriend told me that the first time we went to a party, she met a white girl who was all for communism, right? Mm-hmm. And my girlfriend at the time was like, that is not a good idea. And she's like, what do you know? You don't know anything about communism. What do you know? And my girlfriend was like, I grew up in communist Russia. Like, I grew up in the Soviet Union. Like, that's not a good place to live. Like, people were literally starving to death, and like cars were getting stripped of like metal. Like, if you left it on the curb for more than 20 minutes, people were getting killed like left and right, and nobody really gave a shit, And the girl was just like, well, that's not real communism. And my girlfriend was like, look, you don't understand. That's what the government told us it was. And they tried to enact that stuff, but it just didn't work. And she was like, the reason why, she told that girl, she's like, the reason why I wanted to come here is because there's more opportunities here to do your own thing,
Yeah.
And they kind of went back and forth and argued. But I find it so fascinating that somebody like that girl who had never lived in a country like that was arguing with my girlfriend who had lived it.
Yeah.
Lived it.
It's
telling her that she's like privileged and all that. It's like, my girlfriend wasn't privileged. My girlfriend grew up in a fucking third world country. She grew up in fucking Ukraine.
Yeah.
Which is a very bad place to live in a lot of parts of it,
Yeah.
She grew up like an hour or so away from Chernobyl,
It's crazy because it's like my mom even remembers when the conflicts, like the genocide that happened in Serbia.
But you got to understand though, my girlfriend told me so many stories that made my skin crawl. My girlfriend saw her dad get stabbed to death by the Russian mafia in front of her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that stuff happened all the time over there. And that was all in the name of communism, And that's, like, hearing that perspective from her makes me, like, really turned off by that idea,
Yeah. I mean, it's like when the Soviet Union fell apart, my mom had a friend that she grew up with and everything. He joined the army. Mm. Well, he went over when they had the conflict in Serbia, and he almost lost a leg. He almost lost his leg there, stepping, I think it was on a landmine or an IED.
Yeah.
And he was taught, and she said it was just like, it was crazy because that was like one of those times where they saw another mass genocide in their generation.
Well,
and
this
is kind of what happens with with our family is like, being from Italy and Greece and everything, they got to sort of see what fascism does.
Yeah.
It's like my grandfather hid from the Nazis. And because they were killing the men in the village or rounding them up.
Well, the funny thing is, I just read an article recently. I think I might have shared it with you. I don't remember, but it was about
Might have
that. It was that woman that lived in Austria,
Oh,
and she said that Hitler came. Like she grew up during when Hitler was in power.
Yeah.
when she was a kid, and she said she remembers it. She said everything was great at first. They offered them free health care, free everything, and then little by little they started stripping away their rights. And she said it wasn't like this.
oh yeah, it's a
She
gradual
said
thing.
she said if it would have been like that, they would have put up a fight. There would have been a huge fight. Like they would have like died on that hill, basically.
Yeah.
But she said because it happened over the course of 6 or 7 years, they had everything taken away from them. And it got to the point where people were being punished because they disagreed. At first, they weren't punished. They weren't
Yeah.
punished right away. They were just told, well, you shouldn't do that. But then, like, after a couple of years, it was like, oh, this person got thrown in jail. We don't know where the hell they went.
Yeah.
And it was that's kind of like this lady was basically giving her account of what it was like growing up in Austria during a pre-Hitler
Yeah.
occupation and a post-Hitler occupation. And everything because it was all done under the guise of socialism, is what she said.
Yeah, and it's like, and if you look really at the way the Nazis worked too, their social welfare programs were only possible through expansion and invasion of other countries where they drained them of resources too. So it's
But that's what she said. She said
Yeah.
like everything was cool at first. Like women were given these rights, all these things were given. But she said that like at the end of the day, though, everything was taken away at the end of the day. And she said she's not saying that this is what's going to happen in this country, but she said just take a history lesson from her and
Yeah.
listen to her, listen to what she has to say. And that article was really interesting because it's really cool to hear somebody's perspective that lived a situation like that.
Well, here's the next thing that we might want to get into as well. Have you ever noticed that maybe the reason there's such a big cultural shift and maybe a divide on how we view things like fascism or communism now as acceptable ideas is because we no longer have those elderly people who, like from the World War II generation, who had to encounter it head on as their enemies.
Yeah.
Like, we aren't exactly like those were our grandparents growing up. Is
Yeah.
like that generation that had to deal with those kinds of people.
Yeah.
And now, and I think the reason everything is like also changing in terms of your ideas on what is acceptable in terms of embracing communism or fascism now is because we're being raised like the Generation Z is like being raised by people who don't see a problem with it.
Well, it's almost like they forgot, some people hate Jordan Peterson, love him or hate him, People either love him or hate him. But he did mention one time that the reason why these ideas are becoming popular now is because people have forgotten. He said even with his generation, people have forgotten about what the repercussions of those types of things were back in the day.
Yeah.
He said he only knows the things because he did the research,
Yeah.
But it's a scary thing because, it's like my girlfriend said.
Yeah.
She said that communism sounds really nice on paper, like when you read about it. But she said she understands that human beings are very
Fallible.
corrupt,
Yeah.
and it leads to really bad things. I'm not saying capitalism is perfect.
No.
It has a lot of problems. I hate crony capitalism, man.
Because every system it allows you to be corrupt either way.
I hate it. I hate crony capitalism. I wish there was more checks and balances in place so shit like that doesn't happen. Like monopolies, crony capitalism. I don't agree with any of that fucking crap. I don't like it,
We could always just leave and go to Norway eventually.
Yeah, we could do that. But I just know that I don't think capitalism is perfect. I definitely don't think communism or socialism is perfect at all.
I think I think it's like the problem though is that when we look at socialism as it was weaponized to going past having like social safety nets and social welfare programs to better people. It went to just becoming this whole political ideology where it's like we're just going to give you stuff if you put us in power versus just helping you so that you don't fall into the cracks of society.
Well, it's like, one time I was talking to my buddy. He had he has these cousins, and we went and hung out, and they asked me what I thought about Karl Marx. They asked me like straight up what I thought about Karl Marx, and I said, I mean, he was a German philosopher. He had some ideas about economics and politics. I don't think he was a bad person. I just think he wrote a book about how things could work with these certain types of systems. And I still stand by that. I don't think Karl Marx. People think Karl Marx was evil. I don't think Karl Marx was evil. I just think he was just
kind of like a hippie philosopher at the
yeah,
time.
he's just like a philosopher. Like his ideas are cool, but the people implementing the ideas were evil. You know.
I mean, Karl Marx was a bit of a racist dick too, though.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
He had a lot of racist writings too, like where he talks about like where he actually
I learned something new today.
Yeah, where he actually like talks about like different races and like there were like he has like the beliefs in social Darwinism and everything.
Oh shit!
It's pretty,
okay, I already know where that's going. Social.
So it's like it's like if you embrace like the ideas of Marx, it's like you also have to realize that you're kind of embracing some of his other ideas because.
Well, I guess I must have read just like the really interesting cool ideas, not the really shitty fucking racist fucking garbage ideas.
Well, I mean, it's like if you look at the way that the Nazis, for example, they ran their economy. I mean, our president FDR took those ideas and turned them into New Deal ideas, to where everybody's got a job, everyone has like a place to be, like it created a system that worked. But the thing was that they soon realized that unfortunately they kept all that stuff in play, and that's kind of what keeps us in a bit of an issue that we have now, because they were supposed to abandon them, but they just decided to keep them.
The interesting thing is, when I was born, the Cold War was still going on.
Yeah.
The Cold War ended in like what, 92?
91. 91 was officially when it ended, but there was still, the problem was after the Soviet Union fell apart, there were so many other conflicts that the Russians got involved in.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, is that because shoot, even Russia had armed conflict in its own country.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. I just know that, growing up for me, I was born when the Cold War was still going on.
Yeah.
I remember learning about the Cold War in elementary school. And then I remember going into middle school, and I remember, thinking that, learning that the Cold War was such a terrible thing. And then I remember my views and stuff changed from thinking about that so much to thinking about the Middle East, because when I was in 2001, when I was in 6th grade, that's when the terrorist attacks happened. And then I remember that was something I focused on. And then I remember going into high school, I stopped caring about that as much because it kind of became a thing of the past.
Or it just became the norm.
The norm, yeah. So I get not a thing of the past, but it became the norm. So like you didn't really think about it as much anymore. And then I remember I almost joined the military myself in the Navy. But I remember when I graduated high school, I kind of moved into going to college, and that's when everything started becoming more socially active and liberal, because that's when the internet started becoming more popular.
Yeah.
Internet really blew up after that. And that's when I got my first smartphone in 2009. And that's when everything started changing, and like relationships started becoming more and more like fair weather relationships, like I talked about earlier. And I just remember, like, just to kind of round things out up to now, things have gotten to the point where we just can't have dialogues anymore with people. People just get too mad and don't want to talk anymore.
Yeah. It's unfortunate because we realize that we need to be united, even if we don't agree with each other. Like we've misused words so much in this era. Like we'll call anyone a racist or a Nazi now because they disagree with your ideology, and it's like, and the same goes when like somebody calls you like a libtard or a communist.
Exactly.
It's like, but these are the minority that are shifting the political scene.
Yeah.
And it's bringing us to the place that we're at right now. I mean, because at least you had the 90s and the early 2000s, people were still pretty moderate and pretty much open to at least talking about their disagreements.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it was also part of the news becoming more sensational over time. I mean, it reached a new level of sensationalism in the 80s. Mm-hmm. Then it got even further in the 90s. And then when the 2000s happened, it's not even news anymore. It's pretty much just how they can grab ratings.
Yeah. Yeah, it's there's so many different news outlets now online. I think that's, we were talking about, from childhood to now. And I think the biggest thing that's changed more than anything is we're more connected now more than ever with like the internet. But I think that we're more divided now more than ever. And I think we live in an age of loneliness now more than ever, because people are more connected now, but people don't hang out as much as they used to. People stay at their homes a lot. COVID obviously didn't help with that.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest thing, is that we're more connected now more than ever, but we're more divided now more than ever. And I think that's a good consensus to say things have changed from like the 90s to now. Because I remember being a kid going out playing outside a lot, and now kids nowadays don't even do that anymore. They just sit inside, get on their damn computer, or they get on video games.
Tablet.
Yeah. They're just stuck with a tablet in their face. And who knows what the long-term repercussions are going to be for they call them Generation Alpha. Those are kids now that are
Really?
like between the ages of like.
So I guess it kind of like just restarted on the alphabet spectrum there.
Yeah. So alphas are basically, they were born, I think after like 2012 to now or something like that. I'm not 100% sure on that one, but that's like my nephew. My nephew's like 5, so he's Generation Alpha. But like we don't know what the long-term effects are going to be on those kids, because those kids have always had
instant gratification.
Instant gratification in their face, and we didn't have that. I mean, shit, I remember going from VHS to DVD to having the internet in my face all the time.
I mean, it's crazy because it's like we can even get into the whole thing of like people getting addicted to porn now.
Yeah,
because
back in the day, I've had that problem myself.
I mean, it's like, shoot, like you just jerk off because you're bored.
Yeah.
It's like, but it's because it's so available on your smartphone now. But it's like, I remember back in the day when you found like a nudie mag, like something as simple as a Playboy, like that was enough to get you off. And now you're hearing stories about like the crazier shit coming out on the internet. Like, I mean,
yeah, like, and the OnlyFans stuff and other stuff like that kind of like adds into that, because it kind of adds to that, because like these women and men will do like so many different types of really crazy stuff. I mean, I remember back in the day, 2 girls, 1 cup was supposed to be really funny. Now that's the norm. you know?
I mean, it was funny and disgusting. It was worthy of eating.
Yeah, but people jerk off to that now. Like that's sexy now. That's the norm. That's what I'm saying.
That's the weirdest thing though, is that people do jerk off to that consistently.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, it's changed so much, and I'm glad that kink is becoming more mainstream and popular, because it's not going to be shamed as much anymore, because I'm a part of that community. But the thing is, like, I don't want it to go through a process where it becomes to the point where everybody has their own dumb ideas about how this is supposed to be. It's kind of like with the LGBTQ community. A lot of people hijacked it that aren't even in that community and claim that shit like it's their own, but they're not a part of it.
It's like, I'm sorry, but when there's some members who are saying that, we have to accept pedophilia or something.
Yeah, I'm not cool with that. I'm never gonna be okay with that.
It's like okay, first off, you're a pedophile. You deserve to be beaten to death with a stick.
Yeah.
And if you're telling us that, and if you're gonna be the person who's like an enabler, who's like, oh, we should really give these people
honestly, I have respect for the ones that get help before they do anything. I have respect for those people. But if you're a pedophile and you've done stuff, fuck you. I'm never going to be okay with that shit. I'm never going to be okay with pedophilia like that. Fuck that,
Sex offenders are disgusting human beings.
Yes.
I mean, you've taken somebody's innocence. And I mean, honestly, it's like, but now that we've moved into sort of like the Me Too movement and everything, there's a lot more accountability moving forward. But then there's also a lot of false accusations, and that's also wrong. If you're
Well, it's like I said, it's complicated. That's a
complicated one.
Yeah, it's complicated, and I I want there to be more open dialogue about it, because a lot of this stuff has to be talked about.
It's crazy though how it very much exists in a lot of in Hollywood.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Dumb, Cool, and Weird podcast with Wes and Nick. If you want to check out more of our stuff, go to www.dumbcoolweird.com. You'll find our Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Patreon link if you want to support us. Also, be sure to check out our merch store. And if you're interested in being on our podcast, you can find a link on our website so you can reach out to us and tell us if you want to talk to us about something that's really weird, dumb, or cool. We'd be glad to hear from you. Hope you will stay tuned for the next weird ass episodes we got. Thank you.